in real time, or is this just us?
Well, I guess we'll see.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. Look at your background. Mine's just fun. I bet it's been a year, bud.
It's a
This
wall.
is weird.
Yep. Since you were like the last not person living on the island I saw for a little while there.
It literally was my last trip, like on the plane, and you guys were the last people. We had breakfast, and that was my last trip exactly a year ago. This is kind of surreal. And we'll talk about your job change at some point, but Ben, introduce yourself to the world.
Ben Marks, Director of Global Market Development at Shopware AG. I think AG is short for a German company. No, it's not, yes. But I think I just got fired.
Oh boy.
No, so so a long time, worked in the Magento scene for a very long time. First in the agency world back in the late, I call those naughty knots, the late 2008 I started, and then you and I met Imagine, that first one, Magento Imagine 2011.
Yeah, you were working for another blue company. So you went from blue to, they were Magenta. Wow, Magenta at one point, then orange, then red, to back to blue.
Yep. Yeah, it all comes home. It all comes home.
Yeah. So we met in like what, 2011?
Yep, 2011.
Right? That was the first Magento one.
The first Magento Imagine. Yeah, what an event that was. And we thought it was cool. Had no idea what it would turn into.
No, I mean, it's been, SUMO now is going to be 11 in May. So that's 11 years. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. You switched jobs and actually got hired by Magento. And let's talk about that, actually. Let's talk about that background. You worked for Blue Acorn, or buddy Kevin.
Yep. Actually, had beers with him on the beach. I mean, not really, because you're not allowed to drink on the beach here. But yeah, we had a couple beers right by my house. Just last week, 2 weeks ago. It was good to catch up with him. Yeah. So I started there 2008. I mean, like a lot of us back then, I was a decent PHP developer by then. Knew Zen framework pretty well. I was self-taught, learned on osCommerce back in the day, and I figured Magento would be no problem. But I was, how should you say? How do you say, unprepared? Like, I was very unprepared. But then over time, Kevin, I didn't realize what he was doing at the time, but he let me, I learned to help. I got introduced into the whole open source, philosophy by the online community that kind of grew up around the early days of Magento, pre documentation or training. And Kevin at Blue Acorn just let me, he let me start to spend more time on Stack Overflow. And it was really cool because as I came to know more and understand the application better, I was able to help more and more. And I would actually seek out new lives and new civilizations. That's a Star Trek joke.
Fair enough.
Boy, I'm sorry, your numbers, you probably just lost like 10 subscribers. But it was neat because it was, people were having, they're trying to figure things out on Stack Overflow, and the Magento tags were pretty busy. And so I was able to like go in and go, I've never tried to make a custom shipping method. So this person's having a problem with it, and gave me a chance to dig in. And I often would kind of figure something out and put an answer there. And over time, that builds you enough of a reputation that Magento brought me in to evaluate the training that they were developing. And I kind of invited myself to be one of the first instructors. And that was several years and starting to travel all over the place, teaching Magento developers. And then that eventually just turned into becoming the full-time evangelist in 2014.
They just snagged you up fully.
They did. I mean, they did. They put a job spec out that was, because eventually they figured out like, we should probably have somebody.
Yeah.
And they put a job spec out that was, They didn't exactly
for you. Yeah.
They didn't exactly recruit me, but they're like, need to be a Magento U instructor and have, I mean, it was very specific, like for me.
Which was like, at that point was like 2 of you.
Yeah, there were 2 of us. And it was like, and preferably living in Charleston. No, I mean, and it was, but it was like, it came out and like, I remember I was at Blue Acorn. I was at the office like a little bit later and like, and like it had been out for a few days at least. And there was just a moment where we were having like an all hands or something, and Kevin and I were standing next to each other, and Kevin just looks at me, he's like, "Yeah, we should talk about that that job." And I'm like,
"Good job right
I'm
there."
like, "Kevin, I love this place," and he's like, "Man, I hate to lose you, but you really you can't say no to this opportunity." And he was right. Kevin remains one of I mean, he and Roy Rubin, I think together really helped. They made me the man I am.
It's always good. I mean, Kevin's a good friend. So, which is interesting because I think, in the beginning of this whole thing, and Magento has a lot to do with obviously our company because we've been around for so long because of it. Because back in the day, where you had like osCommerce and Miva, and that's about it, right? You had these small, yeah, exactly, and people just couldn't grasp, and Magento came out the right timing with the right community that we all kind of jumped into really, really well. I think it grew a lot of businesses, and you still have, in my opinion, you still have like old school companies that have been around forever, even there's a whole bunch of new people that jumped into the space from agency perspective and from development perspective, like from software perspective. But there's a lot of us still know each other from back in the day,
Yeah. That's we, for sure. Like I still stay in touch with a lot of them. I think people have fallen out as Magento's focus and product and changed over time. People have come and gone, but a lot of people that I knew from the early days of Magento are still, they're still around, certainly in e-commerce, but a lot of them are still around in the Magento sphere, even if maybe they've broadened what their, the scope of their offering, to include other platforms. It is the case that it ended up being quite the kingmaker, which, years later, I was hiking, a few years back with Roy and Roy Rubin, co-founder of Magento. And, and I'd asked him like, man, did you have any idea that Magento would be this thing? And I knew for sure he was gonna be like, oh man, I had no idea. But he literally, like, he said, no, he said, I wanted to change. I probably should not be, don't quote me on me quoting him, but
free quoting. Yeah, it's fine.
But he basically said like, no, I wanted to disrupt, disrupt e-commerce, really essentially take the balance of power out from the, like the stodgy platforms that were out there, and, really like, but basically put custom commerce in the hands of the merchants and the people, and then basically the ecosystem that would have to be there to support them. And they made the open source case, which was damn good because it took off way faster than they thought, and they had to have this open access community. I mean, if they had gone like, oh, well, only like vetted, like signed partners can access our stuff,
it would never be that.
You would never have heard Magento, just like you've never heard of some other platforms that tried that approach and failed.
Yeah. So that's funny. Speaking of that, we've talked to a whole bunch of new school ones and things that came after Magento. And, the only one that really probably is playing in that world is Shopify, obviously, because they've built something there and people kind of congregated it. But I'm going to give Magento the credit for that too, because a lot of us are doing Shopify also, but a lot of us know each other because of Magento World, right? Yep. I think Magento had this like community-driven type of thing where it fizzled out at some point, but we still have friends and things exactly because of that whole system. And nothing to do with, everybody that has, like you said, everybody that has tried to do it in a closed sort of loop type thing, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm convinced. I mean, I clearly have my bias, but collaboration, coopetition, as is a term that came out of, maybe not originated in the Magento sphere, but was popularized by I think the first person I heard say it was Guido Jansen in the Netherlands. But this idea that we all have to work together. At the end of the day, I might own an agency and I might be competing against this other agency, but but if I'm trying to take too much, this thing's never going to grow anywhere. And so you saw, there's certainly the timing was right, and the opportunity was there. Like osCommerce, anyone smart looking at what had happened with osCommerce, which was this, insufficiently written PHP application, at a time when PHP was a very, very young language. It's a much different, much more robust, much more professional language now. But there were still like PHP 3 files. This was before like PHP had really had classes. So you had this truly open source project that wasn't really run out of a product company. It was just this consortium of people around the world. And then people would just sort of like, oh, well, there's this SDK for this, obscure payments provider, payments vendor in, Kyrgyzstan. I'm going to bang these things together. You had no idea what the quality of any of this was, but this whole like extension ecosystem grew out of it. And it was what everyone used who needed to have like a custom commerce platform for a long time, even given all its shortcomings. And so, Magento Variant comes along and makes Magento and unleashes it on the world, gives it this nice polish. And then, and then also had the connections with like, Bob Schwartz, out of from Nordstrom.com and people who knew people. And people who played golf with people, right? That's the developers, constantly think that, oh, if I just build it better, it'll attract attention. But no, it's you got to get it on the golf courses and everywhere else, so that people can actually, the people making the decisions are talking about it. And that is what happened. And you saw, and like you said, there are businesses and agencies in the world today who are doing things other than Magento, or maybe have moved on from Magento, but they got their start in Magento.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of us, right? It's definitely interesting because old school. What do you have before osCommerce? ATG, IBM, and all the stodgy big world things that strangely they're still around, but they're so bad. It's just like, why?
Yeah. The thing that I keep coming back to, and kind of have led me to where I am today are, openness, collaboration, win, and in part, like, because they enable, I think open source especially, but open collaborative ecosystems allow for innovation. It kind of begs the question, but I think in commerce, it ain't great to be keeping up. Basically, if you want to be future proof, it means that you are actually the one driving future behaviors and setting new norms. So you want to be the most inventive and engaging platform, not just for merchants and their customers, but also for the developers and the vendors out there who want to do interesting things. And they just need a playground for it. And this is the challenge that, like, so I think Shopify, obviously a fantastic platform, and I think merchants are well served by it, up to a point. But the ability of a massive project like that, who has to be a lot of whatever it is, it's that to all people. They kind of end up with some challenges when it comes to how much they can drive the market forward, like from a functionality standpoint. Now they have the market share to do something like, build a fulfillment network. Like, that's something that an open source, e-commerce platform is going to have a hard time doing. But that's a different kind of, that's more organization rather than innovation. Although I don't want to say that that offering is not innovative, but yeah, I like the idea of space existing for innovation, because I think as we facilitate innovation, we just make commerce better for everybody.
Yeah, and like from an agency perspective or a consulting firm like we are, it's fun to see all these, companies kind of battle each other a little bit more of like, here's what this is, here's a great thing. And, none of them really fit all clients, right? You kind of have to have a tool set for everything. Good.
Yeah. What do you, so it's actually a really good thing. Like, what do you, from the agency perspective? I mean, I maintain, and, as we said, my background was agency. And I think I have retained, thankfully, because of that, a priority on, what's best for the merchant, right? So what is really making the merchant's life better, which is why, like, no matter where I'm working, if I see someone trying to put a merchant on, even my employer's platform, but it's a bad fit, I'm going to call that shit out, because, it just wastes time and money. It just drags the whole system down. So when you see the platforms duking it out, like, how does that feel on the end of an agency operator?
I think for me, my problem was always the sales organizations of the platforms, where they push the platform, an agency, like, this is why, like, we're Shopify Plus partner. We haven't been Magento partners since the original partnership. Just what we have other partnerships, but for us, as like, in reality, we don't care about the platform. It's about the merchant. It's all about the merchant. So it's the whatever is the best for that merchant. We've built clients on community of Magento that are doing $150 million, but we've done clients that do, $20 million, but it fits the thing on enterprise level. So there's a whole bunch of things around that come into play, and we kind of work with the merchant. It's all about the merchant. Like, I'm gonna offend a whole bunch of people, but I don't really care. Like, to me, it's about the merchant, and I don't care about the platform. From the perspective of whatever is best, that's where it goes. Because they pay the bills. I'm sorry, but they pay us. You know what I mean? Like, I as simple as that might sound, they pay us to do really good things with them so they can grow. We're going to bring the best tool set as we can to the thing. And then it has a whole bunch of variations to that.
Well, I mean, and that's, if I were a merchant looking for trying to select an agency, that's one of the questions I would ask, which is like, so how many merchants have you referred to a different agency because, you don't work with the platform that they need is not one you use. So, I would look for how often they disqualify merchants in the interest of the merchant. Then like, okay, how many merchants have you taken and, successfully help, scale their business? I think that's an important question.
Answer to that one, 4 in the past 2 weeks.
See, okay, you're one of the good ones. I wish there were more of you. Actually, I think a lot of agencies, especially the ones that survive long term, are they do a good job of that. They just say, look, I think the example I have from my Blue Acorn days was this woman came in and she had been told, like, Magento's that's the new hot stuff. You need to use it. Blue Acorn is this amazing partner. They've got this guy there, Ben Marks. He's amazing. No, they shouldn't say anything about me. But she came to us, and we were really small then. I think that was like the second office. And but her product, she had like it was a single plastic product that came in 5 colors. we're like, and it's a great story and everything. It was really neat, but I'm like this is, and it was Kevin's example. Kevin was just like, yeah, don't use Magento and don't use us, because, like, we think here, I think Lemon Stand was what we ended up suggesting to her, which was I don't even know if it's still around, but it was just,
I believe MailChimp bought it.
Okay, so it was an easy to administer, simple feature set, but it was everything she needed. And Magento would have been, the deal was done before she walked in the door, but Magento was absolutely the wrong platform for her, because it was way too much firepower for what she needed to accomplish. And then over time, that would have been way more investment in maintenance and everything else. And that example always stuck with me. And I carry it through to this day. Obviously, I still remember.
Yeah, we do that all the time. Because I just feel when somebody comes to us, it's like, we got sold on a platform and we're already paying this license, and we come to them and go, listen, this is just silly. I feel bad. Like, to me, it's always been that. I know we're not right because all of them are every single one of platforms that have sales. It's just, they're responsible for this. And that's a problem, because that also gives a big bad name to agencies. The agency might be amazing, but they're forced to do a platform that doesn't fit a client. And then it's a bad working relationship. And that's just wrong. Building this stuff and doing good things for clients is responsibility. And I don't know. I've always felt bad. A lot of times it pisses me off when people push things that they shouldn't be using, because it makes no sense. It's harder to do. Like, this whole business is based on margin, right? This whole business.
Yep.
So how can you increase your margin and look at your spend on technology, on everything else that just has to fit the world? And that's always been the hardest.
Well, yeah, I mean, and there are so many things, because everyone, this is, the margins conversation is becoming increasingly important, as SaaS continues to eat the space. Right. And again, I'm not trying to dump on SaaS. It generally fits a lot of things, mostly, right? I mean,
right.
It can work in a lot of situations. The advantages, there's like a Newtonian kind of benefit, detriment, thing where basically there's for every benefit, there's an equal and opposite detriment. And it's just a matter of like your requirements that, whether you're the agency or you're the merchant, your requirements that, it's a benefit or a detriment, and how much it matters. But SaaS solutions end up being, limited. I think I kind of lost my train of thought there, but like they kind of be, they end up having to be limited. I mean, that's a good thing. But it's also, like I say, I was talking about margins. And the thing is, like, they're owning very specific pieces, right? And over time, you see like Shopify as it grab more and more market share. And my God, I wish I'd invested in the stock like 2 years ago. But how many people could honestly need a store? But as they evolve and they look at their business, and I've always been jealous coming from open source, the commerce world. They have all the data. They literally know everything that's happening. And they can sit there and go, oh, well, if we just, dip our beak in here, look at that. Mm-hmm. We can extract this much more, and so there's always the challenge of, they're gonna eventually, if there's enough of revenue, whether it's like recurring payments or logistics or payments, like they're gonna dip into those streams, and they're gonna make more and more money for their shareholders and for their employees. Nothing wrong with this, and it kind of, we saw it happen in the Magento world as well. Like Magento eventually would start to kind of get into the
dip in those things, yeah.
But when you're looking at the margins, it's like, how much of that margin benefit is passed back to the merchant, right? Okay, so wait, I'm a merchant and I'm using your platform, and you materially benefit from me using your, exclusively your payment solution. Mm-hmm. But probably the way it's positioned is, is it that I'm getting money back, or is it that it's just a higher cost if I allow PayPal in there or something? Right. And then in the like, look at the Magento world, or other software similar to that, where you get into revenue bands. And I don't know if like BigCommerce, I don't know the pricing model for like BigCommerce, but in the Magento enterprise world, or Magento commerce world, the pricing is by bands, right? And
I mean, you're playing that margin that's like all over, like it's just taking a piece of it, and then you go through other service providers. You mail your coupons or whatever else, they're taking a piece of too. Like at some point, it's like, okay, well, what am I doing?
And things like gross revenue is it's a pretty poor proxy for more like what are you making off of this? It's a challenge. Right. It's a challenge with like B2B, high order value, razor thin margins. Like we're approaching like restaurant level margins, and but you're doing 100 million, like in GMV. Well, right. Yeah, I am, but I'm I'm making 10,000 a month and 2 coconuts. So, right. I have a stronger orientation towards.
You and I can go on a rant about this, like pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I have a strong orientation towards owning as much of your destiny as you can, which also comes with a cost. Right. I think a lot of these points get made, without the responsible associated but.
Yeah, there's a but in there all the time, right?
And I'm well known as a responsible but. Sorry, it's the only joke I could think of.
Yes, correct. All right, well let's move on to the new toy. The new toy. I was actually excited. We've been hearing more and more about Shopware. Some of our crew is using it now.
Oh, cool.
So we're definitely seeing it. We've been poking around. Obviously, we're as a company, we're a little based differently than most agencies. We don't go after everything. We're smaller, but we're fully retainer based. So we stay with our clients for a very long time. We have a small crew, so we don't take on a lot of things all the time. But we look at new technology all the time. So Shopware has been in our sites for a while now. Which is awesome. And I was excited when you that popped up. I was like, this is perfect. I know that was going to happen at some point. How did that happen?
As time went on, I mean, obviously well known in the Magento sphere. My time at Magento was spent in, I was there in large part because I wanted to give back. It's this, for all the benefit I derived from Magento. Yeah. And then also as I got into it, I realized I was able to help the business, help people who I knew, people who I watched go from the 2 developers, working in a corner somewhere, and then all of a sudden they've got this huge agency. Or people like Karen Baker who started with answering a question in a forum, like helping a friend out, and then she's built this multi-million-dollar shipping yeah, I mean, it's just this stuff is really cool. So I wanted to help out, but then after the Adobe acquisition, which Adobe's a fantastic company to work for, they were great as an employer. I just think I had reached the end of my usefulness. And along with that, and then the pandemic year kind of disrupted my normal flow of being everywhere but home and spending time with all the people out there. And I was able to do some really cool things during the pandemic. Magento Adobe spun up basically a fund to allow partners to keep developers employed that they would have otherwise had to furlough or fire. I mean, and it was a really cool thing to be involved in that way. But really, I think, as we start to look at life after a pandemic, I'm like, what do I want to do when I grow up? And realizing I needed the challenge, and I'd kind of so I put out there on LinkedIn, I switched my availability to available, and literally no one noticed for several months. I didn't hear from any. And then all of a sudden the floodgates opened, and people, most of the contacts actually came after I flipped my availability to off, and I was chatting with some technology vendors but the Shopware crew who I knew because I'd actually been to Shopware Community Day back in 2016. Just in the course of doing my work, I was in Germany, figured I'd go see what they were all about. Really good vibe, small town, Northwestern Germany. I think it's Northwestern Germany. It's in Germany. Yeah.
Yes. Really tiny town from what I've heard.
Shippingen. And they we started, so I started chatting with the two brothers who founded it, right? So Shopware is entirely bootstrapped. I think founded like Stefan, like when he was 16. So you have two brothers. One's like the technical kind of tactical.
Yep,
One is
yep.
is the design. Like they're it's almost a yin yang. And and they just grew it from these, this two guys, and then they just built this thing, and then eventually figured out in like 2010, once they built this commerce solution, that like, hey, we should be open source. Like that's the smart move. And and you can see their adoption and participation. It all took off after that. So
Yeah.
we were chatting anyway. So this is the background for this conversation, and I realized that we share a lot of the same philosophy in this area. So some of the stuff that I've said on the podcast so far, and I was like, wow, this is a really good opportunity. And we kind of explored what it would look like for me to come on board. So it came together pretty quickly. I just, was like, hey, yeah, we let's do this. And I think it was a case of, we're not sure exactly what you're going to be doing, but we know we know we should be working together. In fact, I think from the original like conversation, and then even like the penultimate draft of the employment agreement had like a completely different job description. In fact, I'm not even sure that my current job description matches the employment agreement that I signed, but it's okay. It's Ben's here, and holy crap, when the news came out, and this week I was announced that I was joining. A lot of people reaching out, a lot of people who know, like especially both Magento and the Shopware space.
Yeah,
they're like, yeah, this makes perfect sense. Several people predicted it. They kind of had put it out there on social media. After I announced I was leaving Adobe, they were like, I bet he's going to go to Shopware. And
yeah, it's funny because we've talked about this last year when we had breakfast, and it was like, Ben's got to go somewhere at some point, which was funny. The other thing happened. I told the crew in Poland, like, so we have a most of our development is in Poland. And the guy who runs it, he was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. Cause they love the Shopware. So I was like, he's like, this is perfect. So that just changes the conversation about the product.
And Bart, like, it's just truly like, I probably could have like asked for a signing bonus if I'd had any idea, because I had a lot of people reach out and say like, oh, this is a really strong signal. And I'm far from the only thing, I'm far from the only new news at Shopware. I mean, they're in the middle of a they're German, well-researched, like well processed shift in what they're working on, what we're working on. And that's, being English first, and really, thinking about things internationally. And I'm actually in there. And as I've met people and we're having these conversations, like, well, I've only been here 2 months, or I've only been here 4 months. I've only been here 7 months. Now, there are lots of people who've been there for years and years and kind of grown with the company, but there are a lot of new people coming in with new, sort of new experience and everything else. And so you see that happening. So I think you see the business evolving even after, I think Shopware 6 was a really important release. Mm-hmm. If I map it to like Magento world, like Magento 1 to Magento 2, probably a better idea would have been to really just thoroughly scrap Magento 1 and just build it fresh with Magento 2. There are a lot of reasons it didn't happen. I'm not the best person to tell that story, and I'm also not shitting on Magento 2 as a product, because I think especially as of like 2.4, it's it has come, Magento 2 has come a long way.
It has gotten better. But we've seen it from beta Magento
2.0 was rough. I'm not betraying any confidence in saying that
no, you're not. It was rough.
But Shopware 6 was like, okay, we're gonna start fresh, and we're gonna build this thing, completely modular. I think switching to Symfony, like having it on Symfony, was the right thing to do. I would wish that Magento had the capacity and opportunity to do that. I'm not sure it was possible, first under eBay, and then, as time goes on, you're in too deep. But, it may, I think Symphony as a framework allows for a lot more, individual freedom, determinism,
flexibility, and just growth. I mean, it's good. It's a good product. So.
And it's and you look at, and then you look more broadly at the Symphony ecosystem, and you look at the other frameworks out there that are widely used that are also based on Symphony. But then, I mean, I was saying this actually on the Space 48 podcast earlier this week. Fabien Potencier. I mean, my goodness, that man. He makes like what he's built seem so casual and easy, like anyone could have done it, but it's just steady execution. And, it's a great basis. And that's what I actually take that example when I'm thinking about what I want to try, what excites me about the opportunity with Shopware, and what I want to build there is, more than just like, oh, maybe make a great e-commerce platform and hopefully people will use it. No, I'm talking about like, if you build the things the right way and in an open enough way, you build an open ecosystem, and it becomes like it becomes a force multiplier, right? Because people build their businesses, they stake their ground in this open ecosystem. And the cool thing is you're not really building it on rented ground. You're building it on this thing that's kind of co-owned by the company and the community. And I think, I maintain that without I keep coming back. Mark Andreessen, 2011. Mark Andreessen, you've not heard of him. He's kind of successful in the tech space. Famously said or observed, software is eating the world, and it's not. I'm not the first person to extend it for where we are now. Yeah. I mean, I thought of it it occurred to me a few days ago, but I looked and other people have said it since maybe like 2017, but SaaS is eating software. Yeah. So software is eating the world, and now SaaS is eating software. And it's not a derogatory thing to say. It's the way it is. And I think without intention, like without someone actually intentionally maintaining a big open space and an open playing field, SaaS is the default path. Like it would all be SaaS. And then you kind of end up with, you still end up with people, people still going to have stores and everything, but it's all kind of, a little boring under one house, and innovation kind of goes away. Basically the oxygen goes out of the room, is what I said in my recent blog post. And, and I don't think I'm wrong in that. And so I think basically the world would be okay if SaaS just eats everything, but I think it's a lot better if a company like Shopware can come in and say, hey, let's be intentionally open, deliberate partners with all the members of our ecosystem. Yeah. And really try and say, hey, these are the rules of engagement. And we're going to play by those rules, and we're going to hope and expect you all to play by those rules. But if we do this and we work together, then we end up with this like big thing. I know I sound like I'm describing a friggin' unicorn here, but this is like, this really is. And my hair's long. It's just Corona. I'm not a hippie. But this is literally, it couldn't be any clearer to me. And I'm not a very clear person. So, so I want to create the environment for a lot of people to both be able to enter and then also be able to grow their businesses and, in their professional networks. And then, wherever things are headed in 3 to 5 years, we'll have a really good basis for taking that journey wherever it's going to go. Me personally, I might just go to Mallorca, but others may just go, further into business. Who knows?
Who knows? That's awesome, man. Well, that's a fun story. I mean, I'm excited that you're there. Obviously, we've known each other for a very long time. So, and I, from what I heard about the platform, it's awesome. It's a good time, and it sounds like from what you're saying, it's like it feels like the beginnings of when we were in, doing Magento World, the beginnings of that community again coming up, but like the 2.0 version of it.
Well, so yeah, I hear you, and I also find myself in a similar orientation, a similar mindset. But I think I probably should say two things. I mean, one, I'm the new person, or a new person, and I probably can't give the most reliable description of what the shopware community has been to date.
Sure.
I also sure as hell do not want to shape it in sort of according to my idea of what it should be, because it's a living, breathing thing right now, and I think that's not by accident, and I think that's important. So I think and having visited with shopware in the past, I think it has enough of itself there. It certainly is a similar story, but but it's also, even given the similarities and the parallels, like, if anyone were trying to follow like the Magento playbook,
Right.
like if you are like, if you're trying to sort of go where Magento has been, like, so by definition, you're trying to do today what was done a few years ago. I mean, there aren't many places in tech where that's going to work out, because the time, the opportunity is different. I mean, even Magento, if you try to create Magento 2 years ago and say, oh, let's take the power back. I mean, I think you would have some attraction for like custom commerce, but I think you've lost the moment, because you don't have that foundational, that gas in the tank, or if you use the ancient sunlight metaphor, like you don't have the petroleum to draw on, right? Because you don't have all of these aspirational merchants just sort of like, oh, hey, I'll just go here. If Shopify of 2017, 2018, if Shopify of that era, if that exists in 2008, you don't get Magento. And I think, so what we have to do today is differentiate more on, be a little bit more forceful about, aggressively going after partners, making shopware fit in different markets, making sure that the product itself has fitment in those markets, building those relationships, but at the same time, making sure that we're not being so prescriptive that we are, we're prescribing anyone from joining. Like, I think you have to be a little bit more organized to succeed today, but if you do it, you can create that open playing field.
Yeah, and community is community, right? Each community sort of section is going to have its own world, and everybody's going to, there might be a cross between them, because we're in the bigger e-commerce space, but each one of them will kind of dial down to what the community looks like after that.
Yeah,
which is fun. Two final questions for you, Ben.
Okay.
Number one, what are you currently obsessed with? It could be anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Figuring
out what I'm supposed to do here.
It doesn't have to be at work.
I mean, that really is. That's all I'm. So yeah, really, I probably am more than I have been in a long time. Really trying to figure out, okay, how do I do what, how can I do what I do really well? Because I think if I do it well, it's going to make a lot of opportunity, and maybe even life-changing opportunity for a lot of others. Yeah,
absolutely. And the last question, what was the last thing you bought online?
Hey, I happen to know this because it happened the other day. I bought a 2-channel mixer because I got to go play some percussion tonight with one of my old bandmates. And, when he has a third person show up, you know what? I can only use one microphone. And, I think no, even the smallest percussion rig needs at least 2 mics. So
that's right.
That's what I think I think I bought it on Amazon.
I mean, it is what it is, right? Ben, thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you around the webs. Where everybody can find you, all the time to do your plugs.
Yeah. So I live here. I'm gonna give you directions to my house. It's just down the street from here. You hit the water.
I know where it is.
when you hit the water, turn left. and make noise and I'll find you. No, I can be reached on the Twitters, Ben Marks, BenMarks. I can be reached via email at b.marks, same spelling as before, at shopware.com. You can also accost me tonight at the Dinghy here on Isle of Palms. I'll be representing with my buddy Patrick.
I love Isle of Palms. One of my favorite places.
I hope to see you back sometime there, Papa.
Soon enough, sir. Thank you so much, Ben.
Good talking with you, Bart.